So yeah, we'll start off with 750 million. I know you said you've been in the business 16 years. Let's go back to the beginning. Like, what got you into the business originally?
We declared bankruptcy. We had, just a ridiculous amount of debt, and we had to hit the reset button. And it was 2010, and I had to, essentially find a career. So I took the plunge and got my license in probably the worst market ever. I didn't have a sphere to lean back on. So I just did the difficult things and I just grinded at it.
What was that like?
And going, wow, we have nothing. We have to completely start over and reinvent ourselves. And we did.
What's been your most proud achievement? What was that like?
I've always had like a chip on my shoulder. I've always felt like nobody was really cheering for me. If anybody doubted me, I'll prove them wrong. I will succeed no matter what.
Welcome back. Today I'm sitting down with Justin Hertz. Justin, thanks so much for joining me. Justin and his wife, Mindy, have done over $750 million worth of real estate sales in the Greater Reno area. And today I wanted to just sit down and talk with Justin, learn about his story so you guys could get to know him and what he and Mindy do. So yeah, Justin, thanks for joining me.
Of course, my pleasure.
So yeah, we'll start off with 750 million. I know you said you've been in the business 16 years. Let's go back to the beginning. Like, what got you into the business originally?
So we moved here in 2005 from San Diego, and I was a small business owner at that time. I sold pet products online. And did that for about 8 years. And then 2009 hit, and obviously the economy was in peril. And one of our biggest business models was selling on Amazon. And our margins got shrunk down to like nothing. And I was keeping the business afloat, but not really for good reason, and racking up a ridiculous amount of debt, both business debt and personal debt, to, get by. And so, made the call in 2009 to sell my company, which was selling it to an employee that just bought it for the inventory. So it's not like I, am a .com person that made $50 million selling my company. I walked away from it. And I don't mind sharing this because, I'm a pretty transparent person. And I think that it's, could be interesting for people to know or whatever, but we declared bankruptcy. We had, just a ridiculous amount of debt, and we had to hit the reset button. And it was 2010, and I had to, essentially find a career. And, a handful of people said, why don't you go into real estate? You be good at that. You are good at sales, and you're good with people, and you're a good business person and whatever. So I took the plunge and got my license in probably the worst market ever, short sales and foreclosures. And I didn't have a sphere to lean back on because I'm not from here. I don't have, tons of people that I can just tell, hey, I got a license and a business is going to come my way. So I just did the difficult things, the grind of, I did 3 to 4 open houses every single weekend without fail. And I did floor time, and I talked to other agents and said, I'll take any lead you give me, and, I don't care and whatnot. And I just grinded at it. And then about a year in, I was, starting to have some success. And my wife said, you're going to need help, even as a TC level doing the back end stuff. And so rather than paying somebody, why don't I quit my job and join you? And I thought, this sounds like a terrible idea, and it's going to be a recipe for our marriage ending quite quickly. But we got some advice from some people in the industry that said, no, it can actually work really well. So we did, and she did the back end stuff and only did that for like 9 months. And then we came to the conclusion that like it didn't make sense. We could outsource that. She could get her license, and then we could, both go at it. And she did, and we did, and we grown steadily over the years from doing 3.5 million the first year to 5.5 million the second year, 8.2, and so on and so forth, and just built this really wonderful database of clients that have genuinely become friends. And now our business is entirely referral. I've never paid, for Zillow or, any of these kinds of things ever. It's all been totally organic and all relationship driven. And so feel certainly very fortunate that we had been successful, and it's pretty startling getting back to being in 2009 or 2010 and being worth nothing. And at that point, having a 2-year-old kid, as our daughter was born in '08, and going, wow, we have nothing, and we have to completely start over and reinvent ourselves and give it our all. And, we did, and we've been very disciplined in terms of maxing out our 401k and buying investment properties and doing all these kinds of things where, now we're in a financial position that is extraordinary. And we never could have foreseen that. Not this level. I was always determined to be successful, and I was always determined to, I had an entrepreneurial spirit, and then I'll outwork anybody, and, I'm intense and whatever, all these things. But to achieve some of the things that we've achieved it's mind blowing.
What's been your most proud achievement?
Business wise? Well, I mean, you can't say that having a daughter and raising a really great kid who is graduating high school here in 2 or 3 weeks and got into the University of Washington and is going there in the fall. And,
congratulations.
So, I mean, it's hard to say that that's not your greatest accomplishment.
Totally.
It would be,
let's say business wise.
Yeah. But business wise, case in point, like we, as I said, are a totally relationship driven business. And so we just had a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we had one of our client appreciation events. It was a trivia event. It was from 4 to 6 on a Sunday. We had catered by like this cool charcuterie company that makes custom charcuterie boards right in front of you. And we had drinks, and we had an ice cream bar and whatever. And it was hosted by DJ Trivia. So everybody played trivia, and it was a blast. And Mindy, my wife, is like the ultimate stat keeper. And she just told me last night, she's like, our final count was 131 people.
Wow.
And it's, so you look around at something like that and you go, wow, this is 131 people that are clients that have genuinely become friends, that are a huge part of our lives, and that our business, is entirely organic and is just doing repeat business with those clients or referrals from those clients. And overall, that would be my biggest business type success.
Yeah, that's phenomenal to grow a business that, especially starting from zero. Do you mind if we go back, and do you mind if I ask, what were the early days like after '09, right? '09 hits, you're getting into real estate, you've got a 2-year-old. What was that like?
We talked about this recently. My wife and I were like, that, God, were we depressed or like very anxious, or, when we had to start over and we had nothing? And at least our recollection is that we weren't, she always believed in me, and she always knew that I would succeed, and that, that it just was a matter of taking the time in order to do it, And so it wasn't like I got my license and suddenly I was making 6 figures, because the market was awful. Again, short sales and foreclosures. And, I think our average price point was, $150,000 or some staggering number like that. And so I think realtors today that have gotten their license within the last 2 or 3 years, if they put in the work, a lot of them, I think, unfortunately, just think that they're going to get a license and they're going to make 6 figures. But if they put in the work, and if you have an average price point of $575,000 in a relatively good market, yeah, you can do reasonably well right away. And mine was, a very, very different market. And so it was a different set of circumstances, and it was truly a grind, and having that like focus and that dedication in order to say, I'm doing 4 open houses every single weekend. And that is 8 hours worth of time with time in between and so on and so forth. And if I'm going to sacrifice not being with my wife and not being with my 2-year-old, I'm going to make sure that I'm effective, and that I meet people, and that I connect with people, and that I generate leads, and that I turn it into something.
Right.
So
it's not for fun.
Oh no, it's not for fun. And this is, this is definitely not an industry or an occupation for the weak. I mean, this is something that I don't think a lot of, agents, and I do some coaching on the side. Just
Oh, do you?
like,
Okay.
yeah.
I was going to ask if you got coaching early on.
I did not. I got little bits and pieces of the core and Tom Ferry and, all of these different guys or whatever, but I never signed up for any of their programs. I would just learn little bits and pieces. And truthfully, they all sort of teach the same concepts: keeping a scorecard, being accountable, whatever, all these kinds of things. But in the last 3 or 4 years, I've done some coaching, either individual one-on-one or small group coaching. I'm doing one right now with like about 8 agents, and it's rewarding, not financially rewarding, but it's rewarding to do. But again, I think that it's the revelation that these agents don't have, that like, this doesn't just magically, money doesn't fall from the tree. This is like you got to put in a lot of work, and you have to deal with a lot of stress and a lot of difficult transactions and all of that.
Rejection.
All of that. Yeah. And you have to basically know what you're getting into and be focused and dedicated in terms of doing what's necessary to be successful. And if you do that, then then you can trust the process. But if you're not involved in the process, then there's nothing to trust. Then you're just, having 3 escrows close in April, and you're like, oh, wow, I just, made X amount of money and I'm going to go off to Cabo for a week. Well, that's not the greatest idea, because what's in your pipeline, right? What's coming up in May and, June and July and that kind of thing. And if you don't have that long-term perspective and run it like an actual business, then you're going to fail.
I know you had mentioned you originally moved from San Diego. Do you guys help quite a bit of people that are moving out of California?
Well, California's always fed our market, obviously. So, both Northern California and Southern California, as far as people leaving California, moving here for tax reasons or quality of life or whatever the reason is. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly been a large portion of our business, but it hasn't been a result of our ties to San Diego and just easily sitting back and getting referrals from people that we know in San Diego that relocate here. By coincidence, sure, we've met plenty of clients along the way that have moved here from San Diego, and you can have a shared experience and you can tell them about what it's been like for you to live here and make the transition and all those kinds of things. And the same thing's true for Northern California. But that's coincidental. That's a product of, that's what our market is that, that has always fed our market in terms of people relocating here from California.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know I was reading more about you guys before you joined in the office today. So Mindy, she represents most buyers. Is it a line in the sand, like, hey, you're always buyers and hey, I'm always...
For the most part, I mean, we try to divide and conquer because it's just efficient, and we're not in the same files at the same time. We're not talking about business at 8:30 at night because we're both dealing with, we deal with our own clients and our own issues and that kind of thing. And so she works exclusively with buyers. I don't work exclusively with sellers. I would say 90% of what I do is with sellers. But if I have a past client that is buying, I don't just like pawn them off to Mindy. Although sometimes I do, only because she's actually better at it than I am. Like she is much more nurturing and much better at that process of taking a buyer through that whole process that's involved. And I thrive more on pricing the property correctly, doing the marketing, doing all that's necessary in order to, help my sellers achieve their goals. So it isn't necessarily a line in the sand, but yeah, it is pretty much divided that way, that she works with buyers and I work with sellers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how has working together been on your guys' relationship?
It's been fine. It hasn't been something that's been like a barrier to overcome. It definitely, like, we have rules and whatnot where, there's unsaid rules or whatever, but we don't talk business at 8:30 at night. That's and, nice. Again, because we're not in the same files dealing with the same clients or whatever, there isn't a need for me to go, did you follow up on this addendum or whatever, or vice versa. So we don't have that element of it. And, I'm sure there are times where I'm annoying because I am like a driver and a type A and very, like, we got to do more kind of thing. And I'm sure there are times where, she, wants me to shut the, whatever up. But again, I would say for the most part that it has not been something that has had a negative effect on a relationship. And if anything, we've built this wonderful thing together, and we're able to like reflect on that and enjoy that.
It's nice to hear, because I'm like you, right? I'm always thinking about, all right, what more could we be doing? We could be productive right now. Why are we laying around?
Right.
Kind of thing. But I've always heard, hey, working with a spouse can be difficult. I'm like, well, it's good to hear that it's not always like that.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think that it's how it's done. I know plenty of agents that are husband and wife that work together that like will show property together. And that's completely baffling to me. In 16 years in the business and 15 years doing it with Mindy, I can count on one hand the time that we've shown property together. It's just like, to me, it doesn't make any sense. It's totally inefficient, so we don't do that. It's not to say that our clients don't get to know us both through the process to some degree, because again, when that relationship carries over and we're friends with them and they come to our events or we go to dinner with them or whatever, it's nice that they know both Justin and Mindy. But again, in the individual file and during the individual transaction, escrow, sale, whatever, we're not butting heads. We're not,
Yeah, you're not stepping each other's lanes.
No.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense to go show the same house to the same people when you could both be doing something else.
Yeah. And I've seen it time and time again. And I've seen it on the listing side as well, where husband and wife go on the listing appointment. And we will occasionally do that if the lead was essentially generated by Mindy because it's somebody that she has known for years or whatever. So she, wants to be there so that they can meet her and whatnot. Right. But it's like I have my process, especially if it's like a seller, whereby I have a routine and I want to see their house and, learn about the features of their house and talk with them about the comps and the pricing and the marketing and all those kinds of things. And so to me, it's like a little bit distracting for us to both be there, because again, like I don't want to step on each other's toes and I don't want to, have that kind of disjointed conversation. But, again, sometimes it happens, but for the most part, we're not, we're like a family of ducks going to show property together, or we are, like we kind of keep things somewhat separate that way.
It makes way more sense. For people listening that are, looking, I know you're more on the sell side. What would you say sets you apart from other agents? What can people really benefit from by working with you as opposed to, there's so many realtors out there nowadays, right? Do you want to dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, and I'm, I don't want to like badmouth other agents or whatever, but, like I think production matters in the sense that puffing out your chest and saying, oh, we're so great. We close 40 houses a year for $35 million a year. And why wouldn't you work with us? No, but that experience matters, because this is the biggest purchase or sale of their lives. And, so having that experience and having somebody navigate them through that process and get the most maximum value for their house that they're selling and so on, it matters for sure. So what separates us? We are, incredibly hardworking, incredibly dedicated, always available to our clients, probably to our detriment in terms of...
I did see that on the website, weekends, after hours.
Yeah, I have always been told by, agents that have been in the business a long time that, they set these very like strict guidelines. Like I don't work after 6 o'clock. So if you text me after 6 o'clock, I will call you the next morning. And that's fine. And that is a discipline that they're able to do. It's not a discipline that I'm able to do. And so if a client needs to talk to me at 8:45 at night, I'll call them at 8:45 at night. If they have a quick question on the fly that they text me at 9:30 at night, I'll reply. So it's just kind of how we're wired. And I think that is refreshing to clients because they don't have, and I say this all the time, that like, it doesn't matter if I have 14 clients at the moment and 8 escrows. Like you'll never hear from me that about, oh my God, how busy I am. And sorry, you texted me at 9, but I'm just calling you back now at 6. Like, no, you will always feel like you're my only client and you're my top priority, period.
That's huge.
And that has nothing to do with price or anything like that. The $300,000 first-time home buyer gets the same level of respect and treatment and all of that the $1.5 million client does, So it's about people. It's about treating people the way that they should be treated. So I think that's, I guess, one of our big skill sets is being available and setting a priority whereby we get back in a timely manner and we're responsive and we are aware that this is a very stressful thing for clients. The process of buying a house or selling a house is really stressful, and you can't abandon them and just say, that you'll get back to them in 6 hours, or pawn them off on your team, or, have your assistant call them or whatever. Like, people do it, but we don't, it's not the way that we operate. So
yeah, no, the responsiveness is huge. And especially on the buyer side and both buyer and seller. Sometimes I feel like people will get involved with agents who are busy, and then the service level takes a hit, which then, it's great you're working with somebody who's busy because they're obviously experienced and they know what they're doing, right? But at the same time, you're giving up on the service side to where it's not as great as of an experience as it could be.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear about how busy you are,
Right,
they don't want to hear that, oh my God, I'm so busy. I've had such a day and like, they're interested in them.
Correct. Yeah.
And, so to me, that's like incredibly frustrating as a part of our industry, is that you deal with other agents, and some are great agents and they're wonderful and they're communicative and they reply to your text and they hop on a call when you need to and everything runs smoothly. And then others will, not respond to you, and you have to ask them 5 times for the addendum and all of these kinds of things. And it's an incredibly frustrating experience. And again, you text them at 9 o'clock in the morning because there's something important that you need to talk to them about, and they don't reply until 6 p.m. And then they carry on with this like, oh, what a day, it's just so crazy. And then you're just like, I don't care, like, why are you telling me this? Like, that's not relevant, like, just do your job. And it's probably a mistake or whatever, but, like with the MLS, we can look up anybody's production.
Yeah.
Right. And so if somebody says, oh my God, I'm so swamped and then you look up their production and year to date, they sold 2 houses or they sold 5 total last year. You're like, who are you kidding? Like, why do you have to put on that attitude and, make all of these excuses as to why you can't just do your job? You can't like be communicative. So there's a massive difference in terms of, you can juggle 8 escrows, as I'm doing right now. You can juggle 8 escrows, and if 6 of them are with good agents that are responsive, that are professional, that are easy to deal with, that are not combative, that are, then your life is much easier, and your job is, you're much more capable of doing that. But the converse of that is, if you have only 4 deals and 3 of them are like complete disasters, and the other agent is impossible to deal with and doesn't respond, or thinks that they're an attorney and they want to be combative and they want to like fight over everything and whatever, then your life is total hell, because that's when you say like, God, I want to walk away from this. This is, it's exhausting. So, like, sometimes you just don't know. After doing it for this many years, you have a sense of what agents you've worked with in the past that you've had a really positive experience with. And then they write you an offer on a listing that you put on the market, and you go,
great. Yeah.
You go, I've worked with this person before, and she or he is great, and they're professional and they're responsive, and they work in a collaborative effort, because that's what this industry is. And it's going to be great. It may not be perfect. Right. We might have problems, but if we work together to solve the problems, then it's manageable. Yeah. But, it's a mixed bag.
Are you able to tell pretty quickly when an agent's newer whether or not they have that? Is it a intangible, or is it something that can...
you can tell right away. You can tell from the presentation in terms of when they call you to ask you some questions relative to, they're going to submit an offer and who's your preferred title or whatever, all those kinds of things. You can have a sense right away of what that's going to be like. And then you have the sense with other agents that, like, brace yourself.
Yeah.
Because this is not going to be fun.
Yeah.
And you can just tell. And that's not entirely just experience, right? It's character. It's who they are. It's how they carry themselves. It's how they treat things. It's how, they're professional and responsive. So it doesn't mean that somebody has to have been in the business 6 years and closed a ton of transactions and whatnot. There's plenty of experienced agents that are a nightmare to deal with.
Yeah.
And you have some that are new agents that are lovely, that are great to work with, and that get it, and that are professional and communicative and work to solve problems.
What about on the lending side?
On the lending side,
working with a bad lender, how does that affect? I don't think many people understand how that affects a transaction.
For sure, yeah. I've had certainly my experiences with bad lenders that are not communicative or can't perform or blame everybody else besides themselves. Or again, they're that type that responds 6 hours later and tells you about what a day they've had. And thing that I always go back to is the movie The Departed. There's a scene with Mark Wahlberg and somebody else, and Mark Wahlberg is like frustrated because they didn't have the cameras turned on for the police footage that they were trying to get. And he says to this other guy, he says, I'm the guy that does my job. You must be the other guy. And that's my perspective is lender, do your job. Escrow officer, do your job. I don't want to babysit you. I don't want to have to hound you. I don't want an excuse as to why you can't perform or why you can't close on time or why you didn't get the docs in advance or why you suddenly discovered that there's some sort of glitch relative to the file. Just do your job. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of lenders that I've had great experiences with, or go-to lenders that I have referred buyers to specifically because I know that they're going to take exceptional care of the client. And then there's plenty of others whereby your buyer comes with a lender and essentially says like, oh, I'm working with so-and-so, and it's a bad experience. Or you're on the listing side and the lender for the buyer is not communicative or doesn't perform or has excuses or all of these kinds of things. So, just like in the realtor world, same thing in the lender world. There's good lenders, there's exceptional lenders, and then there's plenty of really bad lenders. Mm-hmm. So, it's part of that process. I wish that it wasn't part of that process. I wish that at times, that we would just thin the herd.
Yeah.
And that, that the market would have some sort of dip and 3,500 realtors in Northern Nevada would shrink down to 2,200 realtors.
I thought that was going to happen.
Well, so did I.
Yeah.
And it hasn't. But, and the same thing's true with lenders, that I wish that it was just the cream of the crop. Yeah. I wish it was the best lenders, the best agents, the best escrow officers, all working for, a common goal.
Yeah, certainly. It's refreshing to hear your no nonsense, and I label it no nonsense just to make it short, right? But it's refreshing to hear that perspective instead of the more beat around the bush type. Hey, it's okay, it's all good, I understand.
No, yeah. I'm not lackadaisical or whatever with anything. I'm very intense and motivated and driven, and I, want to succeed, and I want to.
What drives you?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just wired that way, and I think I'm just like very focused and very, I'm a list maker, and I'm just, that's just how I am.
It's how you've always been.
Yeah, it's how I've always been. Yeah, I mean, if you get into a therapy session of, what was it like when you were 6 years old or whatever, and this isn't any unique story that anybody else doesn't have. But, my folks got divorced when I was 4, and I, went through all sorts of, not great experiences with, both my parents to some degree or whatever. And, I don't know. I've always had like a chip on my shoulder where I've always felt like nobody was really cheering for me and nobody was really like setting me up for success, and that it was on me, and that, you know, that I like, if anybody doubted me, I'll prove them wrong. I'll show them. And that's not by flexing with a nice car or a nice house or any of that. It's just about like, I will succeed, like no matter what, period. So
I appreciate the mentality. It obviously shows. I've known you for 30 minutes now, and yeah, I appreciate it. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap up here? Anything you want to let buyers or sellers know? Anything you want to let future clients know? Anything you'd like to add in general?
no, I mean, you know, if somebody sees this and connects with it and, you know, gets a sense that, yeah, you know, he's somebody that I want to reach out to because he seems to, you know, really be on it and is, you know, it would be a great person to work with. And, you know, I welcome that. And again, it's all referral based, but to some degree, even people that are referred to you, everyone will Google stalk you, right? And they will look at your Facebook and your Instagram and, you know, videos or whatever. And so, you know, if they see this and they're like, yeah, he seems likable and professional and I want to reach out, like I would love for them to reach out because, you know, this is what I do and this is what I'm passionate about doing. So,
well, Justin, thank you again for joining. I'll include all of Justin's contact info in the notes below. So, yeah, thanks again for driving up. Thanks for taking the time. It's been a pleasure to get to hear your story. And yeah, if you'd like to work with Justin, feel free to reach out to him in the notes below. Thanks.
Sounds good.